If you are looking for a very easy to play composition that uses a standard leveling pattern and uses a 4-cost carry, you need to be looking into playing Jax. In the recent patch, they buffed a lot of his friends, so this comp got much stronger, pretty much for free. So we're gonna get into how to play Skirmishers, how to play Jax, what items are good on Jax, what the leveling patterns are, strengths and weaknesses, the early, mid, and late game, how to play that, what to pivot into if you do not get the comp, and we're gonna go over what to do against almost every matchup there is in the game right now. So all the meta comps, we're gonna tell you, if you're playing Jax, what should you do if you are facing those compositions? So without further ado, let's get right into the guide. I will do a follow-up gameplay video of how to play using this guide as well. And yeah, let's just get right into it. So first things first, this comp is really good at getting top 4s. Here is a sample comp for it. I'm gonna actually show you guys 2 of them. So the first one, we have 4 Dragon Slayer and 6 Skirmishers. And then in the second example, we are running Darius because he reduces everyone's armor. So he's a really good legendary to play with this composition. We'll get into much more detail into these 2 variations later, but I just want to show you guys that briefly so you guys know what comp I'm talking about. And one thing that is super useful about this composition is that you naturally run Jax, and Jax is an Ironclad, and Ironclad is a broken synergy. So you pair a Rel with it, a Nautilus with it, you're gonna be really tanky against physical damage teams. So now that we know what the comp is, let's get into the leveling pattern. So a typical way to play the game is level up to level 4 at 2-1 or 2-2 if you are strong and want to win streak. And unless you are like super weak, I highly recommend pushing levels, which means like leveling up earlier, so you have a better odds of hitting 3-cost units. After that, go to level 5 on stage 2-5 while keeping 10 gold. If you're not able to keep 10 gold, level up on 3-1. If you guys haven't noticed already, we're gonna do what's called a standard leveling pattern. And if you guys need more info on that, check out the leveling guide on the top right here. So here's where things get a little tricky. You wanna hit level 6 at stage 3-2 if you could keep at least 30 gold. And you need to roll down if you are trying to stabilize from a loss streak or trying to maintain a win streak. So one of the great things about this composition, which we'll get into later, is that it is actually very beneficial to roll at 6 on this composition because there are a ton of 3 costs you are looking for. Lee Sin's a Skirmisher and Nidalee's a Skirmisher. And you have a bunch of 2 costs from Trundle and Kennen. So tons of things to find at level 6, so definitely do not be afraid to roll down at level 6 with this composition compared to the other standard leveling pattern compositions. So level 7 is at 4-1 and you roll down until you find a stable board. So if you rolled a lot on 6, don't have to roll that much here. If you did not roll on 6, probably want to roll a little bit more here. Then for level 8, we're going to be hitting level 8 at 4-5 if we are win streaking, and if we did not roll that much at all before. Otherwise, level up to 8 on 5-1 and evaluate how far you need to roll down, and if you could slow roll potentially for 3-star units, such as the 3 costs that we were talking about before. Level 9 is usually not in the cards for this composition because you prefer getting 3 stars. Also, this comp doesn't really benefit that much in the super late game, so level 9 is often not necessary. But there are some cases, if you manage to like 3-star everything, 2-star Jax, and like everything's upgraded, and you got a ton of gold and you haven't won the game yet, like sure, go level 9, that is generally the time to do that. And again guys, if you want more detail on how to do standard leveling patterns, I do have the leveling video that you guys should check out, and on my website at bunnymuffins.lol. On the site, you could also find a copy of this guide in written format with all the pictures included if that is a format that you guys prefer. So now onto the strengths and weaknesses of this composition. So right off the bat, this comp is super good at win streaking in the early and mid game because it is super strong at those points in the game. So if you ever get like a Nidalee off a box in the very first minion rounds, she's going to be carrying a lot of those early game fights if you are able to get to 3 Skirmisher. It is a very strong early game synergy. After that, this comp really makes great use of defensive items, which can't be said for a lot of other compositions. And then next, this comp is really easy to play. So 6 synergy comps generally are pretty easy, so there are not too many variations. The last strength of this comp is something we went over already. You're able to roll very effectively at level 6 and 7. So not too many other 4-cost comps can say the same, so that is definitely an advantage. So if you are finding yourself in a tough spot early game, you're not punished if you roll that much on level 6. So now onto the weaknesses of this composition. This comp does fall off in the late game compared to all the other meta compositions, but that doesn't mean it's bad. If you're getting like 3rd or 2nd place every game, you are very happy about that. This is definitely a top 4 comp and just not a 1st place composition. Now onto the items. So First things first, I just want to talk briefly about shadow items. None of the shadow items are like required in this build. There are definitely some that are recommended, and we're going to get into those right now. So all the Jax items, do I prefer the shadow items on him? I do. And these are the Runon's Hurricane, Bloodthirster, and Quicksilver. All the shadow variations of that I definitely like, especially the Runon's Untamed Hurricane and the Caustic Quicksilver. However, if you have all the regular versions of these items, I would be very happy and I would not complain at all. So the reason why these 3 items work so well on Jax is because Skirmishers, they give a scaling buff that gives a lot of attack damage as the fight goes on. So if you are thinking about what is the best thing to do to take advantage of that trait, well, you want to live as long as possible, and you want an item that makes great use of the additional attack damage. So first item that comes to mind is Runon's Untamed Hurricane. This is the best item for high attack damage units, and there's just no other competition for that if you read the item. So after that, you want survivability. Bloodthirster is a great item for that because, again, he has very high attack damage. Lastly, for Caustic Quicksilver, if you are a frontline carry, you generally want QSS because there is a lot of frontline CC in the game. We could think of examples such as Rel, Nautilus, Kennen, and Morgana. There are many other crowd control effects in the front line, but those are just a few notable ones. And if you ever get hit by these, it just lowers Jax's survivability because of the Bloodthirster a lot, and it lowers his DPS. So Caustic Quicksilver, I definitely like this item on him a lot. Now, if you're not able to get these 3 items, I do suggest getting a Hand of Vengeance. And this item is great because it does both healing and damage for Jax. If you have a Hand of Justice, that could work as well, but I prefer the Hand of Vengeance. Now, if you are looking for like worst case scenario items, let's say like you were really trying to get like a Runon's Hurricane, for example, but like it just never happened and you had a bow, Giant Slayer and Evil Giant Slayer are pretty viable options. The reason why Giant Slayer isn't that great in this composition is because you're running Trundle, and Trundle is naturally a tank killer because of his abilities. Now onto the non-Jax items. So there are a couple options for you guys here. I'm gonna run down all of them because all these like units that you have like 6 Skirmishers, a lot of them can use some items. So first off, Trickster's Gloves or Thieves Gloves. This item can go on pretty much anyone. And then after that, Redemption is great on Pantheon. Morella Namicon or Morival Namicon is great on Kennen because Kennen just swims around through the whole enemy team and puts the debuff on them. Warmogs is really good on Pantheon, Trundle, or Mordekaiser. Frozen Heart's great on Kennen, Viego, and Diana. Titan's Resolve is great on Pantheon. So Pantheon, he is a very cool unit. He throws up a shield and he reduces a ton of damage to him. So if you have Titan's Resolve on him, he's going to be taking a lot of damage. So you're going to be getting tons of Titan stacks, but he's not actually going to be that hurt. And that way you get a ton of free stacks and then he just whacks people for like a ton of damage. It's just like one of the best items on him. Locket of the Iron Solari is great for this composition because you have all units in the front line. So whenever you have that, like Locket is just a no-brainer. ZC Rod's pretty useful as well, but I like the other items a bit more. And then lastly, you could do Gargoyle Stoneplate or Gargoyle Stoneplate of Immortality on Pantheon. However, you need to use your cloaks on Jax because Jax requires, I think, 3 of them now that I think about it. Yeah, Runon's, Bloodthirster, and Quicksilver all use cloaks, so you rarely end up building this item. Now onto the support items. Trapclaw, Shroud of Stillness, and Zephyr are all really good to take on later carousels because they're just one of the best late game items. Then onto spatula items. So Ironclad Spat, Cavalier Spat, and Skirmisher Spat are all really good. So if you have an Ironclad Spat, this can go on anyone. Cavalier Spat is really good on Pantheon, and then Skirmisher Spat, I generally drop this on Darius if I am running him. Now onto the carousel priority. As we said before, cloaks are super important. All 3 Jax items require cloaks, so you want to try to get a cloak on the first carousel. After that, I like belt and bow, and then after that, sword, glove, rod, tier, then vest. So since we've already declared that this is a top 4 composition, oh, and by the way, top 4, in case you guys didn't know, top 4 just means it gets top 4 in the lobby. I'm not saying it's like the 4th best comp in the game at all times. No, it's like, it's a good composition to get 4th place or higher. So it rarely goes below that, but it rarely also wins games. So if you are playing that type of composition, what you will need to do is have a very strong early and mid game. You will want to try to play strongest board and try to preserve as much HP as possible. Do not sacrifice your whole game and try to build Jax items with all your starting items, because if that's the case, you're going to bleed out and lose a ton of health. Instead, make a bunch of good early game items, And if you are able to get a Jax item, definitely build it, but don't like force it out of him. So the best starting units for this composition obviously is going to be the 3 Skirmishers start. We're going to get into other examples, but just to start it off, the first one we have here is Pantheon, Trundle, and Udyr as our 3 Skirmishers. We're going to use Udyr as an item holder. And then you have Set and Zyra as complementary units if you want to play Draconic. After that, another example is adding in Sejuani and Kled. This gives you Cavalier and Nightbringer. And then after that, you could do a Hellion Skirmisher type of build, which is Kennen with Morellonomicon, Udyr with the Runons, and then you add in Kled and Ziggs as the 2 Hellions. So obviously these are the most ideal because 3 Skirmishers, they're pretty good, but like we can't get that all the time. So a substitute opener is the Hellion opener. So you just have 3 Hellion plus a Cavalier. This is good if you have a Kennen and an ability power item. And then you would use Ziggs as your item holder here. After that, you could also do a Callista opener, which is Callista Aatrox plus 2 other units. It could be either 2 tanks, you could do 3 redeemed like we have here with Leona and Syndra, and then you'd put all the Jax items on Callista. And then the last one we're gonna go over is the Brawler Sins variation. Kha'Zix is gonna be your item holder here. You're gonna do Gragas in the front line with Warwick, and then add in another assassin such as LeBlanc or Katarina. What's great about this version is that once you hit 3 Skirmishers, you could just sell all the assassins, drop all the Skirmishers in, and call it a day. Another thing to note, just like how in the leveling guide we talked about this before, you will want to level up aggressively because you will want to try to get 2 and 3 costs as quickly as possible. Now onto the mid game, this is going to be stages 3 and stage 4. So by the time you reach stage 3-2, you'll want to stabilize your board if you haven't already. If you don't have 3 Skirmishers yet at this point, you could roll for them. And if you are 1 Skirmisher off of 6 Skirmishers and you have a decent econ or you're win streaking as well, definitely roll at least 10 gold, if not 20, to try to find them. So this is a typical board if you hit 6 Skirmishers. You have Nidalee as the item holder, and then you could add in the other items we went over before on all the other Skirmishers, such as Redemption on Pantheon, Morello on Kennen, all that good stuff from before. But this is a typical 6 Skirmisher build. So if you do not have 6 Skirmishers, you're going to be playing a variation of some of the early game boards that we saw before, which is a core of 3 Skirmishers plus 3 other units. Usually you could add in things such as Nightbringer and Dawnbringer, but you could also just add in extra Skirmishers without getting additional synergy bonuses. Now onto stage 4. So 4-1, that's when you want to hit 6 Skirmishers and 1 Jax. So if you don't have that, definitely try to roll for them here. If you already have 6 Skirmishers, but you're sitting on 3 or more pairs, this is another time to roll as well. And don't be afraid to hold extra Skirmisher units because your win condition will likely arise from 3-starring one of them. So if you're rolling down, you have a Nidalee 2-star already. You see a couple extra Nidalees, just buy them. Even though you're looking for like Lee Sin or Kennen, let's say. If you see the extra Nidalees, just keep them. So now we want to go into what a level 7 board can look like with Jax. We have Jax with the Jax items there. We have Pantheon. And yeah, that's pretty much our board here. It's just 6 Skirmishers plus the Rel. If you can't find Rel, Nautilus is pretty good as well because you still get Ironclad. And if you can't get him, Nightbringer or Dawnbringer works fine too. Now onto the late game. This is stage 5 and beyond. So late game, you just want to focus on positioning here. You've already found your composition and you rarely are going to go for level 9. However, you will need to decide which units you can 3-star as you roll down at level 8. So the order of priority for 3-starring units is Pantheon, Jax, Trundle, Lee Sin, Kennen, and Nidalee. Obviously, Jax is super rare, so he's not the first priority, and that's just because he's a 4-cost unit. Pantheon's super strong, Trundle's great, and then Lee Sin, Kennen, and Nidalee are the rest. So as noted in the start of the guide, we have 2 popular variations that we want you to play, and the first one is 6 Skirmishers and 4 Dragon Slayers. If you went directly into level 8, you're more likely to find Diana and Morgana because they are 4-cost units, and 4 Dragon Slayers is just a really strong synergy at the moment. This variation is also really strong if your Jax items are not perfect, because the extra ability power from 4 Dragon Slayers is a way to make up for that gap. Now we'll go into the second example, which is the stronger example, but you will need Darius 2-star. This board is generally better if you have best in slot Jax because Darius and Rel serve as a ton of utility for Jax, so Darius is going to be reducing everyone's armor, Rel is going to serve as a stun bot and give you Ironclad, so this just unlocks the most potential out of Jax as you possibly can. So if you are in a lobby where you are contested, there are other Jax players, or if you are in a lobby with a lot of Dravens, this is also pretty useful because you have all your Ironclads as well. You can even play Nautilus over the Darius before you get a 2-star Darius. Now, as I talked about before, positioning is super important in the late game. So I want to give you guys positioning tips for 5 different characters. First one is Pantheon. Oh, by the way, guys, if you guys are liking what you see in the guide so far, definitely drop a like down below as it helps me a ton in the YouTube algorithm. So Pantheon is a unit that you want to position in front of their attack damage carry, such as all the Draven players. So if Draven's on the top right corner, put Pantheon on the top right. This way, the Draven focuses on the Pantheon and he just takes a really long time to die so Draven doesn't destroy your whole team. After that, Trundle, you want to place Trundle in front of their tankiest unit because Trundle steals all their stats, so it makes their tankiest unit really easy to kill. Next up is Kennen. For Kennen, you want to place him on the far side of the enemy carries, so he'll dash over to them and stun them. And this way he won't be baited by like just random bait units in a corner. Next up is Lee Sin. If you are fighting an assassin player, look to backline Lee Sin because he'll apply an attack speed debuff nerf to them, giving you a lot more time for the rest of your team to kill everyone. Fun fact, if you are facing another Jax player, you might think like, oh, let me put my Lee Sin in front of his Jax. If their Jax has a Quicksilver, the attack speed nerf that Lee Sin's gonna give out isn't gonna work, so don't even bother with that. Last up is Viego. So Viego, he can make or break a lot of different team fights. Like, people think Viego sucks, and like as a legendary alone, he kind of does. Like he's not gonna 1v9 carry, but there are those games where he steals the enemy Draven, he steals the enemy Karma, and he just completely carries through that other unit. So positioning Viego is so important. So it's very important to put him on the same side as enemy carries. However, sometimes people are smarter than that and they protect their carries by surrounding them. If that is the case, it is better to jump and take a support unit rather than trying to take out the carry. So let's say they are top right with a Vel'Koz comp and they put their Lux on the opposite corner as like a bait unit. And if they are completely surrounding the Vel'Koz, just jump to the Lux and steal the Lux. However, if they don't protect their backline and they have everyone in the front row and everyone in the back, just focus on their carries. Put your Viego next to their carry and he's going to CC them, if not kill them, and steal them for your team. Now let's go over a couple of the matchups. So speaking of Vel'Koz, there are 2 variants of Vel'Koz, Spellweaver Abomination and the more frontline flex variation of the Vel'Koz build. If you guys are having trouble playing Vel'Koz, I did make a guide on it last week that you guys can check out. I'll leave a card up here. So as a note, the 4 Spellweaver variation is much better against Jax than the flex variation. And the reason for this is because Jax has 3 cloaks on him generally, so the non-Spellweaver version does have trouble killing the Jax because Jax is countered by burst damage. Next up is 4 Invoker. So 4 Invoker, this is one of the strongest comps in the game right now, and you'll pretty much always lose to this comp if someone manages to hit it. However, since this comp is hard to hit, you need to be knocking these guys out before they hit their late game comp. This is what I was talking about with the top 4 stuff. Let's say they're like 2 players going for 4 Invoker. One of them's not going to hit, and you just knock that guy out, and then the other guy wins the lobby. Unfortunate, but that's sometimes how TFT works. Now on to Draven. So the Draven matchup is favored for Draven until you hit Viego. So with a good Pantheon and Trundle positioning, you can win if your Pantheon is just like tanking all of Draven's damage. However, sometimes they run Runons, and sometimes your Trundle can eat Mordekaiser or Hecarim's tank stats and just like overtake them that way. However, until you hit Viego, the matchup's pretty hard because they're smarter than that. They're not going to have their Draven stuck on your Pantheon. But once you get Viego, you could put Pantheon on one side, Viego on the other. So no matter where they put their carry, they're going to be hit by something. They're either going to get stolen by Viego or they are going to get stuck on a Pantheon. Next up is Assassins. So as long as your Jax does not get one shot at the start of the fight, Assassins are very favorable for Jax. So you definitely like facing these guys. The next matchup I want to talk about is Dawnbringer Karma. So this build has built-in anti-heal with Pantheon, and combining that with Jax's itemization, which brings a lot of magic resistance, this makes Skirmishers pretty favored in the Karma matchup. As long as Karma does not get to the 4 Invoker stage that we talked about before, Jax is definitely too much to handle for Karma because Karma is a damage over time champion. She doesn't really burst people down unless you're really squishy, so she just kind of does a lot of consistent damage, and Jax often can out-heal that with the Bloodthirster. Now onto Aphelios. So Aphelios, he isn't really played right now, but maybe in a couple of patches he is back. But Jax is really good into Aphelios because, again, Aphelios does a lot of spread out damage, and Jax just is able to tank through most of that damage. Last matchup I want to talk about is Yasuo. This is Nightbringer Yasuo. So this matchup is pretty even, so you just need to outposition in order to win this fight. So now that we're done with the matchups, you must be wondering, like, what if a lot of people are going for the Jax comp? What should I do? So the great thing about this is that there is a very good pivot to get into, and it is the Draven composition. So Draven and Jax, I don't know if you noticed this before, but you look at their items, they use very similar items, apart from the Quicksilver. If you look at the Runons, you look at the Bloodthirster, like those are great Draven items. So if you are not finding any Jaxes, not finding any Skirmishers, and you see that like, hey, no one's going Draven this game, just go for Draven. You already got the Runon, so what else are you waiting for? So here's a sample Draven pivot board that you can use. You can see that we had the 4 Dragon Slayers that we had from the other build, which has Pantheon and Trundle as our 2 Skirmishers. We also have Viego as a 3rd Skirmisher, and then we have the Draven with Draven items, and then just a bunch of other tank units such as Hecarim and Rel to give various synergies. So before we head off, I want to give you guys 2 quick tips about this composition, and that is, don't underestimate what Trundle brings to this composition. There are a couple clips out there with Trundle doing a hilarious stuff without any items. So if you guys have seen those before, let me know down in the comments. Or if you have your own Trundle clip that you want to share, like definitely put those in the comments as well. And lastly, Jax is not the sole carry of the composition. You notice in this guide, we're talking about like a Skirmisher build. We're not talking about a Jax build. When we talked about Vel'Koz, we talked about a Vel'Koz build, not a redeemed build. But with Jax, the real power comes from Skirmishers. We talked about Pantheon a lot. We talked about Trundle a lot. All these different champions bring something to the table. It's not just a solo carry Jax 1v9. And so I just want to let you know, you got to respect the rest of the team because that is where the true power comes in. So that is it for my Skirmisher guide today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. And if you guys did, definitely hit the like down below. If we get 100 likes, I don't know. Think of something for me to do in the comments. Hopefully we get more than that as well. Maybe if we get to like 500 or 1,000. So, okay, in the comments, write down like a like challenge. And if it is a lot of likes, it could be something crazy. If it's not too many likes, it could be something a little more tame. But just give me some ideas down there below. And if you do have a friend who is struggling with playing Jax, like just send them this guide as well. That helps a lot too. But yeah, that's it for me today. Oh yeah, and join the Discord if you haven't already. All the links in the description below, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff there. But yeah, I will see you guys later. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe. And of course, smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.